Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast. This podcast is meant to bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. Whether you are a current or aspiring short-term rental property manager, host, or real estate investor, you're in the right place. Dive in with us to uncover the captivating stories and golden nuggets from industry heavyweights, including leaders, operators, investors, syndicators, founders, and entrepreneurs. So thank you. Really, thank you for embarking on this journey with me. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast, and I promise I'll do my best to deliver value-packed episodes that hopefully will not just inform, but also help inspire the next generation of real estate and hospitality professionals. Truly yours, Sebastián Muñoz. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. Today, I am very excited to have with me two very special guests, Jean-Emmanuel as well as Simon Seroussi, both co-founders of two companies, Sosuite and SuiteUp, that are basically, an operations, company as well as a technology company. And I'm super excited to have them on. So before anything else, Jean, Simon, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about how you got started into this, vacation rental world, and how did the two of you even, get to know each other?
For sure. Hey, Sebastian. Thank you so much for having us. Pleasure to be on the podcast with you. So I guess story for Simon and I goes back to France, really. We both grew up in the same hometown called Meudon, a little bit west of Paris. And we knew of each other since forever. But we were never really hanging out directly. We had common friends, though. And then I think it was about 8 years ago now, when I first moved to New York, Simon had moved to the US before me. He moved just after high school. And when I got there, my parents, who were very close to Simon's parents, told me, "Hey, there's this guy. He's currently living in New York. Just try and be friend with him." And that's basically what happened. So I got to New York City. I didn't know anybody, and I sent a message to Simon. And we ended up meeting, and we became friends from there.
Oh wow!
There was no.
So you tried hard. You tried hard to.
It worked.
And follow your parents' advice.
For sure.
Amazing.
And I'm glad I did. This was definitely one of the most meaningful intro that my parents did back in the day.
But you were each studying different things, right? You each came to the United States to do your master's, I believe, but in different fields. You were doing more finance, Jean, if I'm not mistaken, and on your end it was more like business. Simon, was it that?
So Jean, you're right. Jean did study like finance and mathematics. I was mostly studying liberal arts related things, ranging from media and then East Asian studies. Actually, I did.
Oh wow!
I did about half of my degree, almost 2 years in Shanghai, a good portion in Beijing, and then a good portion in Madrid as well. All traveling experiences that have, to some extent, also I think contributed to being interested in working in travel at some point.
Wow. So you guys get to know each other just casually as friends. When do you realize, and why, that, hey, at some point we're going to have to do something together? Like you and I are going to end up building something together. What was that moment where it clicked for the two of you?
So it was pretty funny because so Jean and I on our own rights were kind of pretty early Airbnb hosts. It was a fantastic way for us as students, and then later on, with our first jobs and very limited budget, to do things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. It expanded our budgets. We were able to travel a bit more. When we visited our friends and family in France, we didn't leave like an overpriced New York studio empty, we could actually, leverage the real estate. And so we were both doing that sort of on our side. And I think one day Jean and I were on a bus visiting a friend from Boston, and on the way back, this time I'm the one who pitched to Jean and told him, listen, like I think there's a real opportunity here to elevate the experience that we've been doing casually on the side with our own homes, and do it a bit more seriously. And there's a city near New York that we don't really know much about, but so it happens that the regulations around short-term rentals are very well established there and are very clear. So we wouldn't want to do something. I didn't want something in a blurry area, and that city was Philadelphia. And so I told Jean, let's try and do something there. Not a home that we would then rent on the side, but rather a full-time, apartment hotel, effectively. Though the term I don't think was really a thing back there.
Yeah, the first conversation that we had also, like I remember, we were both interested in buying some real estate. We thought that this would be a good investment at the time. It was the right timing, but we also wanted to try and explore, what would happen if we were to put this unit on the short-term rental market, just like what we did for the personal homes that we had in New York City. During that bus ride, I remember like Simon throwing some numbers at me and telling me, hey, we're going to be making like 4 times the mortgage. And I was like, there's no way. This is not how it works. And then we ended up running a little bit more calculations and like building a model on it. And it was a small studio, so it wasn't like some crazy numbers, but just the multiples that we were looking at, we were definitely seeing a big arbitrage between the long-term rental market and the short-term rental market. And really, like, this is the main arbitrage that we were banking on. We're betting on the fact that we think that if we manage a unit properly, we can end up making more money despite the operations cost by renting an apartment short-term versus renting it long-term. So yeah, that first units, we ended up buying it, I don't know, maybe like 6 months later, something like that. I think it took some time to find that first unit, just because we were not going to Philly very often. We would like go on the weekends, schedule a bunch of visits.
It was also a big deal for us. Like it was like our one investment. We couldn't really screw it up. We had that money saved on the side, and we hadn't, I think, quite seen 5 years ahead. Like, oh, how many? It was like let's buy one and do it right and see what that takes us.
Yeah.
So it was a studio, you say, that you guys were buying.
Yeah, just one studio in Philadelphia, and that's what really that's what really became the case study for Sosuite. This is we launched it in June of 2018. Once we acquired a place, we ended up spending about I think it was 4 to 6 weeks on the renovation. Now, it's not because we did a lot of renovation. It's because we were spending the entire weekdays in New York City, working our full-time jobs. And then we would come back on the weekends, work Saturday, Sunday ourselves, and then go back to New York City. So it was not efficient at all, but really fun. And we ended up basically like retrofitting the studio, which was very residential for somebody who definitely lived there for like full time. There was way too much storage for a short-term rental unit. We ended up bringing in what was the name of the company? The College Hunks, I think was the name of the company. They came with like 3 young guys. They destroyed everything because like the stuff was built into the wall. Like you couldn't just take it out cleanly because it had been a custom built. So they ended up destroying everything to to remove all that built-in storage that we didn't need for short-term rental. And then we added a bed that we bought from IKEA. Like it was very, very scrappy. 6 weeks later, the unit is ready, put in Airbnb, and we start managing that ourselves.
Wow. And Joe, so just one question there, because you guys are into, at this point, you're like, we're going to buy a place together. And I don't know if you're thinking, hey, we're going to buy some more and then we're going to quit our full-time jobs at some point. What were you guys looking at scaling an actual real estate investment portfolio? And was that at some point part of the plan? Or did you just want to do it as kind of an experiment and you never thought of actually growing it into a larger, investment portfolio?
Honestly, it was more of it was definitely more of the latter initially. It was like, we wanted to invest in something we hadn't invested in, which was real estate. We were always told that this is the type of asset class you want to invest in early in life because it appreciates and because you have typically long-term loans that you're repaying over many, many years. And so for all those reasons, it was mostly just a personal little venture that we were doing here. We weren't really seeing many steps ahead. Okay. And in fact, I would say like once we launched, two things I guess happened. On one hand, we saw the opportunity. We were like, wow, like, Simon's crazy numbers aren't that far off after all. And then the second thing that we sort of realized was, we don't have much cash left. What do we go from there? Neither Jean or I have a background in commercial real estate, and nor in like capital raise. We were like 20-year-old somethings that had been, wanted to do a real estate investment, really put a lot of love into it. And not just like, we did go scrappy with things like furniture, but we still, designed it quite well, repainted everything, focused on wall art, on usability, created a guide for our guests, which eventually turned into a digital guide that we originally built, I think, on Notion. So we had done all those things, trying to leverage as well technology to make it an efficient thing, because we were managing this from New York. We weren't even in the city, and we had full-time jobs. What we quickly realized is obviously buying real estate is a capital intensive thing. You can leverage if you know how, but we didn't really know much then. So Jean back then, and I were looking at a lot of sort of the emerging competitors in the market. And back then, we were looking up to things to companies like Sonder, and we sort of started understanding that there was an alternate model that did not require as much capital that we could start working with. And so I would say a few months later, probably about 6 months after we launched, we started looking, and I think we opened our second property in March 2019, so almost a year later. Looking for owners.
That arbitrage? Were you then renting absolutely. And subleasing, or okay?
Yeah. So we partnered with someone local in Philly who was an Airbnb host in his own right, and we partnered with them to help us find owners that had homes that they had trouble renting. Simple as that. And then typically, in the multifamily space for long-term rentals, those are usually larger units, 2 and 3 bedrooms. What's fantastic is that that's typically what works the best in the vacation and short-term rental industry, because with 1 bedrooms, you're competing a bit more directly with hotels. With 2 bedrooms, you're not. It's a more unique product. So our second property we opened on Walnut Street in Philadelphia was, I'm not kidding here, was over a karaoke bar. That's what we could put our hands on back then. And we once we tested out the property, because we wanted to test the product after full furnishing it, we quickly realized that the decibel levels were quite high, and one of the bedrooms floor was quite literally vibrating from Friday to Sunday. But we got to work and problem solve, and I think we really elevated our design game for that second property. So we were able to still make it a very successful launch.
Wow. I really want to get into how you scale that from 2 properties to like 200 in like no time. But before that, I just want to, go back to what you said, which I think is super important when it comes to the decision about what model you want to scale with, right? Because a lot of people want to buy, real estate. They want to buy property, but they are just thinking about that first acquisition. They're not thinking about what's going to be my exit strategy and how am I going to then be able to buy my second, which, as you said, if you don't know how to raise capital or you don't know how to basically put in place forced appreciation that you're then going to be able to refinance to buy something else, then there's no exit strategy really that would allow you to grow fast. And we know that with short-term rentals, it's not easy to achieve that forced appreciation. So really interesting what you said about how you chose arbitrage as an alternative model that was less capital intensive. Definitely a piece of advice there that is super, super relevant for anyone that is starting out. But then you scale that tremendously fast from 2 properties to 200, and I know you incorporated different models as well. You didn't just have arbitrage. You then went into management. So tell us about how you guys went from 2 to more than 200, and when in that process did you start testing out other models other than arbitrage, and why?
Yeah, so I can start with this one, and Simon, you can add anything if I'm missing some info. But so as Simon said, like the main issue that we saw with the acquisition was the fact that it's capital intensive and it's very time consuming because the process of finding properties is very tedious. You need to make sure that they're very good deals because like you're buying them at a certain purchase price. Once the transaction is done, there's not much you can do. We quickly ventured out of this model for the main reason being that we didn't have neither the time to wait or the patience, I should say, nor the capital. But this first model is not necessarily a bad model. I think that if you're somebody who's patient and who's looking for safe returns, this is probably one of the better model for you. So it's not because we didn't go with this model at first that any of the people listening to this podcast should not go to this model. There are many benefits to it. The main one being that you're a little bit more guaranteed to have good returns on your investment. The benefit of the model that we went for, which is the lease arbitrage model, is the fact that the negotiation is typically the quickest because you basically approach a landlord and you're telling them that you're going to guarantee them a certain amount every month. So they're not taking any risk. They're not really betting on your company. You're offering them exactly what they're asking. They just have to get comfortable with the fact that you're going to be using their property for commercial purposes. And so you have to, provide them certain assurances, making sure that you have the right permits and licenses, that your business is insured or anything like that. But besides that, it's very easy, I should say, to be able to convince an owner to go for a lease arbitrage model. However, for the business itself, so for Sosuite in this case, it's also a pretty tricky model because you agree on a certain amount of rents that you will have to pay regardless of what your revenue is. Which means that if you have great months, then that could be great for you. The upside can be tremendous. But then if you have down months, for example, what happened to us during COVID, you can end up losing money on your property. And if you've scaled very quickly because this model allowed you to scale quickly, then you can end up with steeper losses, right? Because at the middle of March, you scaled your portfolio to 30 properties or 50 properties, and I'm talking from experience. And then, Airbnb decides to cancel every single reservation because COVID started and they choose to side with the guests, you end up with zero revenue. There's not much that you can do at this point, and you're still on the hook for the rent amount. So that's really the big risk. And it's really during COVID that we started thinking about other models, because we saw that having only this this lease arbitrage model, and on top of that, for us, we were only in one city, in Philadelphia. We were really exposed to one single market, and if that market were to went down, if the arbitrage were to close, then that would be the end of the business. And so we started thinking about other business models, and in particular, two specifically. They're kind of very close to each other. Both management agreements, where instead of agreeing to a fixed rent, we either get commissions, so a percentage of the revenue that the owner generates, or a hybrid model where we have a certain low guarantee, so much lower than what the rent would be, but this sometimes gives a confidence level that's helpful during the negotiation with the owners, plus a revenue share that's a little bit more aggressive for us, given that we take more risk. And during COVID is really when we started shifting for new deals coming in. We would try to put a little bit more emphasis into growing the management agreement side rather than the lease arbitrage model.
One thing is, I think that's also worth adding is by that time we had built a bit of a track record. We had it was 2 years since we had purchased that one asset, and then a year since we had launched our first lease arbitrage models. And so on one hand, we knew a bit more how the market behaved and what its capabilities were. On the other hand, we had data that we could share with owners on the potential upside. And so some of the owners, in their own right, wanted to take part in the upside that we were getting by signing management agreements. So it was both a way to protect our liabilities, protect our downside, and reduce our liabilities, which leases obviously only increase. But it was also a way to build, stronger partnership with ownership groups where incentives were more aligned. There's obviously a big issue you have with the lease arbitrage model as well is if an issue happens with the property, an owner isn't incentivized to fix it the same day. And in fact, if it was a long-term renter, it could take a couple of days to fix it, and that would be quite a normal reaction. In the short-term rental space, if you're not fixing it within a couple of hours, the guest is an awful experience. You're left with a bad review. You can't be open to new bookings. And so the incentives aren't quite aligned as well as much as they would be in management agreements. So for all those reasons, on top of what Jean mentioned, which is protecting the business, management agreements, just made a lot more sense for us just to grow. And to be fair, they were also a lot less capital intensive. When you're signing a master lease, while you can get what is called tenant improvement allowances, so effectively cash from ownership groups or landlords to put into the property to buy furniture, to improve fixtures, you're still typically on the hook for a good amount of cost to launch, to buy the furniture and to buy the OS&E, the operating equipment, everything that needs to go into the unit to start a stay. Whereas with management agreements, because there's shared upside, that's a responsibility that more frequently falls on owners. Or at the very least, mostly on owners. And so there is an aspect of the business here that also, management agreements allow you to grow faster. One thing that's important as well for any listeners, we were in a very urban market where short-term rental management agreements were not a thing at all back then. No one was really doing that. There were no hospitality groups in any major cities that were managing apartment hotels on behalf of owners. Sonder had started the lease arbitrage model, had started popularize it, had scaled it to really big heights, but that was pretty much it. So we were very much in green pastures here, whereas I would say in more rural areas where the vacation rental space has been around for much longer, management models have sort of thrived for a lot longer. And typically it makes more sense because it's people's second homes and they want it to be managed when they're not there. whereas that's not as much the case in urban markets. So, for anybody who wants to get into this, the market you choose is important, the location is important, whether it's rural or urban. All those things also can have an impact on the type of model that you might want to approach.
Amazing breakdown of the different models. And you would think that the story ends here and you guys found the right model and the rest, just kept scaling from there. But no, there's a new model that comes in. And so basically you guys are figuring out, all the tech tools that are required to be efficient at running, an operation at the scale where you're at that point. And you're seeing some inefficiencies. You're seeing a lot of tools that do the same thing, but you end up having to just stack them all up, or like you put it very well, my friend Simon, the Swiss knife that you end up having to, basically, the way I say it is you end up having to, have like 10 different planes and 10 different pilots, and sometimes you just can't afford all of that. Past a certain point, you probably could. But what about until you get there? So talk to us about when is it that you guys start thinking internally about tech as something that you could probably bring in-house and start developing, and how did that lead to, the naissance of SweetUp?
So I think that was probably March of 2022. Before 2022, I was personally working at my previous job, PwC, so in consulting, and Sosuite was still a side hustle for me, and it was already Simon's full-time job. But Simon had his hands very full for that year, for 2021, where he was full-time and I was not, so he was running the ship. And then when I joined full-time in February 2022, we were both available to start, working full-time on new initiatives. My very first initiative was a complete failure. We were trying to switch ERP. So we were trying to move from QuickBooks to another system called Sage Intacct. And I thought that this would be a big upgrade. I ended up sinking like a whole month worth of my time trying to make this work, and maybe it was just above my skill level when it comes to ERP. We failed the integration, unfortunately, and I ended up losing a lot of my time. And so that brings us to March 2022, where I'm frustrated and I'm trying to add value. I've just wasted my first month full-time on my own business, and I'm trying to create something of true value. And the first thing that we had always talked about, and we had something at the time, but it wasn't like the greatest either, was the booking engine for Sosuite. So that was the first thing that we really started thinking about. We were still using Guesty's booking engine. So Guesty had always been our property management system at Sosuite since I think 2019 or something. We knew that the default booking engine of Guesty could be improved. So we ended up spending a little bit of time on this. We do a first iteration. Simon looks at it. He says it looks awful. He creates a whole new design. We implement the new design, and then the latest version that we ended up building, which was not too far after, maybe like 2 months later. So I would say around May of 2022, we had the close to final version of the booking engine, which is pretty much what we have as of today, with a few tweaks. So that was the very first product. And then once we were able to build this in a reasonable amount of time, with me spending like 30% of my time on this and not really much external costs, that really gave us the confidence that we could really build anything that we wanted. And we were users of a lot of different tools. And it was always frustrating for the entire team to switch from all these different platforms. But then on top of that, the cost was just insane. I think that the monthly subscriptions that we had as of summer of 2022 was north of $100 per month per unit, between your lock management system, between your noise monitoring system, your guest portal, your guest verification, your PMS, obviously, maybe a few different channel managers that you have on the side, and like these subscriptions just added up, and they didn't have the level of integration that we really needed to be able to create the automations that we wanted to have internally. So we started thinking about this system, like the dream system that we want to build for Sosuite, and really we look at every single tool that we have in the tech stack, and we're like, okay, the dream tech stack definitely includes all of these tools that we use today, but it includes them in a way that is better integrated. But the issue is that if we just like try to tap into every single one of these tools, that might work in the short term, but then there's always going to be limitations in terms of how much integration we want to have, because we would rely on these partners' API to be able to have certain functionalities. Versus if we were to bring that in-house, then we have full control into what automation we want to have, what variable you want to expose, etc. Plus, once you start building the overall structure of your reservations and your guests, etc., the challenge to be able to add one more feature is marginal, right? Because you already have all that base that really helps you build your next product. You don't have to start from scratch as if you were starting like a whole brand new SaaS company. So instead of going after everything at once, we go after the ones that we think are the lowest hanging fruit. And for us at that point, I think it was Suite Monitor. So basically the noise monitoring devices. We end up finding this solution called Netatmo, which is basically they sell you the hardware, but then there's no monthly subscription. They have an open API. And we built a version of a noise monitoring system that leverages this hardware that we would install in each of the units, that has the same functionality as what we had before, without the monthly cost that we used to pay to these providers previously. So that was really the first product that we built. And as soon as this one was successful, we were like, okay, we really have a shot. This one is successful. Let's see what's next.
Interesting. I just want to stop there for a second. I want to understand, for anyone out there that's looking at their tech stack that includes a lot of providers, some of them are data, some of them are pricing providers, you have channel managers, you have PMS, you have listing optimization software, financial reconciliation software. The way you're describing it is almost, you look at it and you're like, there's certain features that I want that I don't have because they don't give it to me. And also they don't integrate very well between them. So let me build some of it. So it's not like you knew from the get-go in which of those verticals you wanted to develop. Is more like you decided we want to develop some of our tools in-house. Let's see which one we start with. And then you said that the low-hanging fruit was, noise monitoring. That's why you started with that. For anyone that's looking at their tech stack and asking themselves that question, what would you say, made noise monitoring appear as low-hanging fruit for you guys at that moment, as far as something that you could actually build in-house? Was it cost? Was it also related with previous background and expertise of yours and your team at that moment? Or was it just like, it seems to be the fastest one to do? Because if you go that route and if you start telling yourself, I can develop in-house everything, like there's so many directions that you end up
For sure.
being pulled towards. So how did you decide that that was the first thing you wanted to develop, and how did that evolve to what you guys have now, which is a much broader system that includes many other functionalities?
So I think what's interesting. So I think you in many ways you nailed it, Sebastian. So I think everything starts in many ways with in the tool set, in your toolkit, just to retrace those steps in with your PMS, right? That's where your availability, your rates, and your inventory are set up. That's where you can see all the properties that you have, what's available, your bookings, and your reservations. And obviously outside of that, there are many other tools that one can use, some of which can be considered maybe more optional to optimize the operation, some of which might be considered more critical. A PMS typically falls into the critical column because without it, you typically can't connect to channel managers, be on more channels, and it becomes really challenging to grow and scale in the digital world. Then there are RMSs and revenue management systems, and there are a couple of great ones out there. And on the other side, there's sort of everything that happens after a guest books. The guest books on a channel, whether it's a direct channel like a booking engine or an OTA like Airbnb, that channel shows up in your PMS. And then what? How do you then ensure that your operation is optimized, that your guest has the information they need when they need it, that you can keep your operations safe as well and protect your properties. And that in first, what we kind of noticed was that this entire guest journey from having booked already to checking out had many different tools that each addressed a portion of that journey. So the noise, the decibel detection, the noise detection. There were a couple of reasons why we decided with that. We started with that. I think the first one was, well, to be fair, we started with the booking engine, and that was a great success. That was our first success. We tripled our direct bookings from 7% to almost 25 in like the span of a quarter. So that was the first good signals, and then the noise monitoring was one, definitely cost. We are a bootstrapped company, so being able to save a few bucks per listing per month when we started growing to 150 plus listings back then mattered. I think other thing is that we saw a really interesting thing in that hardware that Jean mentioned in that Atmo, and it was that we could get more than just noise. We could get temperature, we could get humidity, we could get CO2 and air quality, and being able to tap into all those other variables in order to get things like understand mold risk and other potential interesting insights for hosts, we thought was a very interesting parameter that we hadn't quite considered. So I'd say like it's a combination of cost, it's a combination of features, but obviously also the fact that it's quite central. As you scale your portfolio, you can't have your ears in every unit, near every unit, and you certainly can't have a staff member or yourself live next door as easily as you'd want to.
After the booking engine, basically noise monitoring was the next thing that you guys decided to bring in house and develop. But again, it wasn't everything. you would think that's it, but there's more. So I mean, walk us through the vision of right now, what you guys are trying to build with SweetUp as an operator, like as someone that uses what you guys are building. Tell us what the vision for SweetUp is currently, now that you've taken those steps, started with building, your direct booking engine, now went on to building your actual, noise monitoring. And now you're looking at a larger issue here, which is guest experience as a whole. What is that vision, and what are some of the things that you guys are doing right now that are really setting you guys apart from, everything else that's out there?
So I'll just finish on the thought, and then Jean, I'll hand you the floor. But I think we started out Sosuite, as Jean highlighted earlier, living in another city than where our operation was. We started it. We were both living in New York. We both had full-time jobs and entire lives there, and we sort of embarked into this slightly crazy adventure of starting a very physical, human-centered business, hospitality company. In another city, not 20 minutes away, but 2 hours away, an hour and a half if you're lucky, and there's not too much traffic. So that important facet, I think, was just it changed the way we saw things. I think in terms of operations, we always, and it stayed really true to who we were as operators and who we were and who we now are, I think, as software builders, where in a decentralized operation, unlike a traditional hotel where there's one location and staff dedicated to it, typically, you have to think differently. You have to think about contactless experiences for guests, but you can't just make the experiences humanless either. You have to bring warmth and bring hospitality and personalization into it. Same with the operations. Like, you need to make sure that your team, you can trust your team, that you can that they're upholding the standards that you've set with them, and software is an incredible tool there to help achieve those goals. So and because it allows you to control those things without necessarily being on site every day all the time. And noise monitoring, I think, fits into that as well. It's like, you don't have to have security on site. If there's an alert, you get it on your phone, you get it by email, you get it to Slack, whatever tool you use, and then in a couple seconds, let the guests know politely that they're not respecting your house rules, and that they're maybe being a bit loud. Ask them to quiet it down, and typically it resolves it right then and there. So without having to go and knock on a door. That I think is just an important part of how we conceive things generally as both an operators and builders. And Jean, if you want to share a bit more about SweetUp, I think that would be great.
For sure. So I guess to continue on, like, what the product was, like the first product that we built, so Suite Monitor, and then the vision that we had for it, we decided on Suite Monitor because of the fact that it was the lowest hanging fruit, as we said earlier. But then the vision that we really had was we want operators to be able to run the entire shift from one platform. Like, we were just very, very fed up with the fact that we had to jump through so many different platforms to run a day-to-day operations, right? So like, your staff is going to be using one tool to clock in, and then you're going to have another system for your task management, and then if your device goes offline, you need to go check on this other app, and then if the code is not scheduled properly, you have to check on this other app. And then if you have a noise alert, then you have an app for that. And it just keeps on going on and on and on and on. And this was really, really frustrating for us. One, because you get distracted all the time. There's so much context switching happening, but also because you have to be able to receive some of these notifications. It's like, either you subscribe to email and text messages and you get flooded with that stuff, or you have to monitor each of your 10 different dashboards, and that's not really possible. We wanted to bring everything into one platform so that you have your one dashboard where you can see everything that's actually important. You can manage everything from one place, so it's also quicker from an operation perspective. It's like one app to be able to do it all. But also, as we mentioned earlier, and maybe the most important, for the level of automation that we were aiming for, it was just not possible with the current tools. Just because of the fact that, just to give you some examples, when you have a certain guest request from your guest app, we wanted our system to be able to create automatically a task for your maintenance person or your housekeeper, or your hospitality agent if it's requesting additional towels. This process used to live in two different systems, and so there was no way for us because of the fact that they didn't have the appropriate open API to be able to create that link between these two systems where this was fully automated. And so we had people, staff working full-time for Sosuite, who would just like read through every single message and like guest requests and stuff like that, and would literally like click buttons, assign tasks, create them manually. This is something that we knew could be automated. Same thing with a device goes offline on one platform, right? We know that the next thing that needs to happen is always the same thing. We need to have the next person who's in the unit go check on that device to troubleshoot and figure out what's going on. Has the device been unplugged, or is it the Wi-Fi that went down, or is it has it lost battery? Regardless, we need to have like the next person who's going to be on site to go and check on that device. And once again, if you have your task management system here, and then the system that controls which device is online and offline somewhere else, this was not possible. So really, to come back on the vision, it's we want to bring every single tool that's required for managing the day-to-day of your units, but also for the guest experience to be able to handle, the check-in and to improve on their stay, to bring all of that onto one platform to create what we think is really going to be the best guest experience that will be available on the market as like a ready to sell product. And that's going to come from the level of integrations between these different modules. They're going to be native under the same platform, so they're going to be able to communicate very seamlessly between each other. We are creating some automations that were not possible before, and also, in general, since we've started a company, we've put a very, very big emphasis on UI and UX. And I think that this is something that was very important for us as we built even the first booking engine. That is maybe not as important for other tech platforms. I think that we probably invest more than average on UI UX, and but for this, at the end of the day, we think that this is going to be one of the key differentiator between a good experience for a guest and a great experience.
I love it.
The other thing I think that's really important is like the operation suffers when you're using disconnected systems, but so does the guest experience. Like ultimately, when your operation becomes disjointed, guests inevitably feel the end of that at some point. Because that task that, to use Jean's example, that was requested by a guest, well, instead of getting created automatically and not missing a beat, it had to be created manually and potentially did not include the level of detail that the guest wanted in there. Or it required 5 back and forths between the guest and the person on the other end of the line communicating with the guest to schedule it, to find time that works. Why not simply ask the guests themselves in an automated format, when would you like us to come to the unit to fix that issue? And are you giving us permission to enter? That's something that can be solved with a standard form, as opposed to having back and forth, communication there. So the goal here was, obviously integrated systems have a ton of value operationally. They have a ton of value as well for guest experience. But what that ends up leading to is that the humans at the company can spend more time focusing on actually delivering better guest experiences versus doing manual and frankly not very enriching work. Right. Like something about Sosuite is like every single staff member is full time. Our housekeepers, our guest experience staff, our maintenance teams, and we wanted to make sure they felt like they had a career and weren't just cogs, quite literally, in a machine pushing buttons in order to make things work. That's something that machines can do really well in today's world. Let's have the humans do things that are enriching for both themselves and in turn for the guests.
Exactly, and I think it's the essence of hospitality, right? It's the power of using tech is precisely like you just described, enabling the humans to do human work, and human work that's going to have an impact on the guest experience, on their job satisfaction. While allowing them to want to stay with the company for longer. So I think what you guys are doing as far as bringing together guest experience and field operations is just very, very interesting. I would like to end with, a couple of questions around more so the values that you've decided to build this company around. And also, before we get into the company values, I want to understand how the process of building, essentially two companies together between the two of you, what started off as a nice friendship, thanks to your parents that decided to say, "Hey, go talk to this guy," and now it's a business partnership. What do you think has made it work between the two of you as far as skills that are complementary, or maybe personality? What do you think makes it so that you guys are still here? You haven't parted ways like many partnerships end up doing.
So maybe I can take the first one on the values, and then Jean, I'll let you answer on the quality of our still existing friendship. So on the values, I think for Sosuite, growth first. I mean, it was to not accept the status quo, and that's something that we've agreed to both at Sosuite and SuiteUp. It's not because something happens in a certain way and works that we can't improve it. And having that first principle thinking of most processes can be improved. Okay is not sufficient. This is something that like a type of excellence that I think we strive for. In terms of I think how we're thinking about it with SweetUp, it's about democratizing access to great technology. Today, like vacation rental and short-term rental operators with whether it's 5 units, 1 unit, 10 unit, or even 500 units, to some extent, and increasingly now they're competing with big hotel brands or highly venture-backed operators as well, that have spent a ton of money on tech, that have their own web apps, their own mobile apps, and all the bells and whistles in between. With SweetUp, the idea is we understand that not everybody has those resources, and yet everybody in our sector, I think if you get into this, it's because you want to provide a fantastic guest experience to other humans. So with that said, instead of leaving it to guesswork, figure out what tools you're going to use and what's the best tech stack, and try and build that over trial and error over the next 2 years and see if it works for you. To bring a platform, an integrated system that hosts of various sizes can rely on for their entire guest experience and their entire operation, and that competes, frankly, with the quality of software. And if not, I would go as far as saying that is better than the quality of software than some of the big flags and big brands in hospitality out there. That I think is like the core value of SweetUp. And lastly, it's built by operators. It's Jean and I, while we have a background in technology, and we're happy to get back to those roots now. We spent last 5 years almost, building this operation, and what we've learned along the way is something that we can now share with others through that tool. We believe we've made it usable to everyone from someone on the field running around cleaning rooms, which is an extremely challenging job, all the way to someone in a more office setting, ensuring that the shift is happening accordingly. So democratizing it to other operators, but also to the different users, because it was built by users.
I love what you said about not accepting the status quo, and that leads to so many questions about why are things done a certain way. And I think without those questions, you guys wouldn't be building what you guys are building today. So for anyone that's listening, I think that's very valuable advice. Always ask yourself, why are we doing this way? Is there a better way of doing this? Is there a better way of achieving this same objective in a more with less resources? And if not everyone has the courage to say, if not, let's build it. But if you have the background, if you have the team, if you have the resources, why not? And start small and start building from there. I love that, not accepting the status quo. And what would you say, Jean, when it comes to what has helped you guys figure things out and stay in business, essentially as business partners, with all the challenges and difficult times and ups and downs. Everything sounds good in here while we're talking about it over a podcast, but I'm sure there's a lot of challenges that you guys have faced behind the scenes.
For sure. I mean, that's when we went into this venture, it was difficult to picture how our relationship would change, because it's always something where like going into it, as two friends, you have an idea to start a business. You always see the good side, right? Because you've lived your relationship as friends, which is much easier than the relationship of being co-founders. And so as friend, you always have these, like pink tinted glasses, and everything's good, and you think that it's going to be super easy. When you start building a business together, there's obviously a lot of day-to-day stress that comes into play, and I think that's something that has been very important for us to be able to keep the great relationship that we have today, is trying to make sure to always understand the other person's point of view. We have different backgrounds, we have different experiences. Sometimes we're going to have different ideas about where to go in the future, and it's very important to recognize that sometimes you might be right and sometimes you might be wrong, and being able to listen to the other person's point of view, and really think, okay, like based on their knowledge and my knowledge, which one is more likely. And if it's hard to make a decision, then you can also like pull more people into the decision. But really trying to be open-minded, I think, is critical. Having respect, I think, is the foundation to any relationship, and that's also true for being good friends and co-founders. I mean, and like in general, you asked also the question about building two businesses. It's like, it's tough. There's many days where I wonder why we're doing that to us. The issue with building two businesses at once, and it's also very good that we're two to be able to divide this work, obviously, but you get a lot more distracted, right? Like there's so many more things that are thrown at you at a given time, and you have to switch context continuously during the same day between problems for this company and then problems for this company. The way that we've tried to solve it for now, which is still something that we are working on, but Simon is tackling more of the issues on the Sosuite side and shielding me from a lot of it. I still handle some responsibilities related to like finance and some technology stuff related to Sosuite, and then on the SweetUp side, I mostly handle the build out of the products, and Simon is mostly on the sales side. So we've tried to kind of like specialize into our own arenas, but with one person leading more one project than the other on each side. That has also helped with maybe decision making, making sure that we were not spending too much time. Like it's good to spend some time, but you don't want to be spending too much time arguing about every single decision. When you build a startup, the speed of execution is key. Like you're trying to build a good product as fast as you can. You're not trying to build a perfect product in 20 years, so speed is critical, and having clear responsibilities into each company has also helped speed up that decision making.
I think speed is often not valued enough. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that don't see why speed is essential when you're working, especially at a startup. But what's very cool about you guys is that you can build with speed because you have the feedback loop internally, meaning you can get feedback from your own operation about your own technology. And like you guys were explaining to me at some point, you can turn around and say, hey, this is not working properly, and the developer, the user is here and the developer is sitting right next. So it facilitates speed when it comes to building, which is amazing. And just to wrap it up here, something else that I think it's worth highlighting for the audience. You mentioned, Simon, first principle thinking, and then you, Jean, talked about bringing in maybe other parties when you guys don't reach a particular decision. And there's this guy called Ray Dalio that actually wrote a book called Principles, and he talks about the concept of triangulating. Well, first of all, thinking in terms of principles, like when it comes to not accepting the status quo, when that becomes a pair of glasses through which you evaluate problems and through which you take decisions, that's super powerful, right? But then also, like, whenever disagreements are in place, whenever you guys cannot agree on what's the best direction forward, bringing in maybe a third point of view, and circulating with other experts to come to a good final decision, I think is also relevant. And I think you wanted to add something in there, Simon.
I think, my team might smirk for me saying this, but there's one principle that I try and increasingly live by, and I think it's valid just as much in group decision making as it is with a close co-founder relationship. It's to try and do things as much as possible by consent and not by consensus. So Jean might approach and say, "Hey, I want to do this initiative," and I might not fully think or be bought into it. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Letting go of things and not accepting that you need to be fully excited and fully bought in every single initiative is also okay. The idea is that as long as what your business partner, what your team is proposing, it doesn't have ultra adverse effects on what you're trying to achieve, for instance, then letting it be and letting it happen and then experimenting in that way is a good thing. There's plenty of times where team members are going to come to you and share ideas that you might not agree with, but you can still consent to them and move forward. And that has to do with speed as well, because if you have to work on consensus with everything, then you can't move fast enough on decision making. If everybody needs to agree and everybody needs to be extremely excited about every single initiative, then you end up launching 1 out of 50 initiatives. Try and launch 10 and 3 will succeed. If you only launch 1, you're decreasing your chances of success by quite a lot.
Very, very good point. It's about finding what's right and not trying to always be the person that's right. I think when you come to a table to make a decision or to brainstorm with that intention of finding the right thing to do, rather than trying to be the one who is bringing the right idea, I think collaboration flows, and that's amazing. And maybe just to wrap it up on your end, Jean, with a guiding principle of yours. I mean, you guys talked about not accepting the status quo, like for the company. You, Simon, you talked about leaving by consent and not by consensus and taking decisions in that way. What about you, Jan? What would you say is one principle or framework or value of yours personally that you bring to the company when it comes to the decisions you guys make or pretty much the way you guys do work in general?
Yeah, work hard, says Simon in the chat. I think I mean definitely like the ability to deliver with consistency, and like when you start doing something, you go all the way until the delivery of the project. To me, like this is something that we've always struggled since the beginning, where we have so many ideas every single day, right? And it gets pretty easy to think about something, start it, and then not necessarily finish it. To me, it's like I will only be satisfied once the project that I start is completed. It doesn't have to be perfect, and like finding the right levels at which you can say, okay, this project is done is something else that's critical as you build your product. But like starting something, finishing it, and then moving on to the next one. Not having necessarily too many projects going on at the same time. Trying to stay focused. I think this is maybe like the most important advice that I would have. Focus is your most important resource. The more focus you have, the more you'll get done. It's a lot easier to work on like 5 projects, one after the other one, rather than working on 5 projects at once. You're going to be going a lot faster by putting them, like one after the other in series rather than having them in parallel. Just because you remove all of that context switching, you're able to zone into one specific problem. But then the key here, once again, is like knowing when to put an end to that project, because you don't want to fall into the trap of, okay, like I've done this, but it's not quite perfect. Let me just like build this one more thing, and then you keep on tweaking, and then you end up working on one project for the whole year, or like for the whole month, when this could have been like 95% of the perfect version that you had in mind, but it takes 1/10 of the time. So focus, like keeping the right focus is the one value that I try to stick to the most when it comes to my work, because I know that this is how I personally deliver the best.
That's amazing. Well, listen, guys, I could have you on here for hours. I swear this conversation has been that good. A lot of nuggets and a lot of pieces of wisdom and advice for the audience and anyone out there that's listening. Super excited to see the future for Sosuite and SweetUp. Super excited to keep following you guys and cheering, from the sidelines. And hopefully we'll, have you guys back in the show a couple of months from now, and you guys will tell us everything you've accomplished. Because I'm sure there's going to be a lot coming in the next couple of months for you guys. So definitely very, very grateful for your time. And I think this was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Sebastian. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, great as always to catch up, Sebastian. Have a good one. Thanks again for having us.